think about this no longer as just this boom town where, get in, get out, but what's the web we really want?
I think just one thing that's funny about that time was that we used to buy these Bibles, these encyclopedias, these huge reference manuals that were like this thick for writing code because the internet was still young.
People don't realize, they all know WordPress, they don't necessarily know open source. And I've realized with some other local friends, they don't necessarily know what the open source means.
But the reality situation is that that's what the WordPress community was built on. Every one of those people were people who were just getting started at one point, and got a little bit of extra help from somebody. Welcome to Impressive Hosting, a podcast about the role hosting plays in shaping the open web. I'm your host, Jesse Friedman. On this show, we go deeper than uptime and dashboards. We talk about hosting as infrastructure, about ownership, independence, and what it takes to be an ethical, high-end WordPress hosting company that actually serves creators, businesses, and the internet itself. Before we dive in, head to impressive.host. That's where you can comment on episodes, ask follow-up questions, and help shape future conversations. You'll also find links to follow, like, and subscribe wherever you listen. Today, we're having Dan Canas back on. We had a great conversation about user experience of security. We talked about the community and the way in which things are shaping for them, hosting responsibility towards security and the messaging around that. We talked about WordCamp Canada and your efforts there to help bring more people back to the or into the WordPress community, which is great. What we were leaving off, though, with is talking about AI, and we were talking about the need that people have to understand human patterns, to understand the systems that connect us all, and in doing so, they're actually improving their likelihood to be, better employed in the future, or more successful with the use of AI. I think this is really true. One of the things I've been working on lately is asking people in this industry, people outside this industry, CEOs, tech gods, as they say sometimes, what it is that my daughter, who's 18 and about to go off to college, what she should be studying. Because it feels like these careers that we have positioned as, defensible, as safe, despite the technological evolution that we're living in, may not be as safe in their current form. Maybe they are going to shift, evolve. People need to change the way they're working. But certainly, maybe a computer science degree is not the next best path. Or, even if you were thinking about going into law or medicine, maybe AI is going to have a bigger hand in that in the future. And so I've asked a lot of people. I've asked philosophers. I've listened to podcasts like Ryan Holiday, who's a Stoic philosopher. He talked about this on one of his podcasts. I asked Matt Mullenweg. I asked Stephen Wolfram. I've asked Hillary Mason. I've asked a whole bunch of people in my life what it is that my daughter should be studying. And almost unanimously, everyone has said that the liberal arts, that understanding psychology, philosophy, understanding art, understanding the way in which people connect and talk and human needs. But it keeps going back to this idea of understanding human systems, the invisible connective tissue between us humans and what it is that we need is the best way to understand what to build next. And that is something that AI is likely going to struggle with for the near future. I have gotten away from saying that AI will never be able to do X because it just seems like that might be setting myself up for failure. But it definitely seems like AI is not going to be solving that specific issue anytime soon. I'm curious, Dan, what do you think about that? And you've been using AI now for a while for your own work. Do you feel like that makes sense? Does that resonate?
It does, very closely. One of my daughters is in at arts in art school in Chicago at the School of the Art Institute there, and is just doing all this. She's always been very non-digital. Well, actually, she got started when I gave her an iPad, but she's really coming at it from a much more hands-on, even learn how to make your paints thing. And then another daughter is here with me she's midway through University of Alberta, and they have a program, interdisciplinary program she is part of, called Society, Technology, or Science, Technology, and Society. S's might be switched around, which is very open to how students want to tailor it. She started in philosophy and then would do a math minor, and just kind of mixed up a bunch of things in there. And I and her family, her parents and grandparents all have a kind of broad humanities and arts background, but I find myself saying, "Oh, you gotta dig into Python. You've done R. That's cool, but like." I'm like advocating the opposite way, and probably annoying her some of the time. Like, oh, we got to dive in. We pulled out Studio, and I'm explaining like, well, here's this history of this thing called the lamp stack, and and she's picked up things here and there, but I'm like waiting for what's actually gonna get you like hands on and dig in there. And I think yeah, I don't know if it's going to be a comp sci course, because I remember that being is like it was a huge turnoff. I had like started coding in grade 4 on a really old on the olden days, and when you get there, it's like, oh, sorting, all these ways to sort arrays. That's
Yeah.
not making video
Well,
games.
I think just one thing that's funny about that time was that we used to buy these Bibles, these encyclopedias, these huge reference manuals that were like this thick for writing code because the internet was still young and there was no OpenStack, there was no place to go ask these questions and how do you code this and how do you write that and see
Right.
all these examples. GitHub wasn't a place where you could go and see how other open source developers are writing code and developing things up. So we used to have these books, these giant manuals, and I remember a teacher of mine handed me hers, and it was a few versions out of date, but it came with all of her highlights. It came with all of her notes written in the margins, and that was like a prized possession back then. It was like it was like something really special. You're pushing your kids to learn Python to kind of go back. But that's kind of the point, right? Like maybe they don't need a formal education around code anymore. Maybe it's slightly different. What you need more is the passion and the interest and the curiosity to know, that you can build something.
I think
But
so.
you can learn how to do it yourself. Maybe I don't know.
And I think I kind of came up in the old bar camp scene and Joomla and Drupal users groups and then and WordPress, and these three kind of all intersected, and that just that social dynamic. I feel younger people want some of that back. It kind of goes along with their rediscovery of vinyl and browsing real bookstores, and they all know WordPress as this thing. Like, so my daughter's class, like they have to take turns um, writing on the course blog and doing a presentation about the speaker, introducing the speaker of the week from across the faculty, and going through their work. So they're used to seeing it as an established institutional tool, and not always, and some of them know or have done something with it, but um, there's this whole community and there's this whole open thing behind it, an open culture. You can dive into this pretty deep, but what are the entry points that really turn them on? Is it may be actually the relationships or the creative thing. For my art school daughter, she's got a .com site. I just had to kind of set it up and let her go, and she's taken off with that. So that's
Yeah.
um, portfolio and displaying her stuff. So that's my learnings from kids and having kids and watching them grow up and exceed me, and students, you want them to do the same thing, is just enough like unstructured play while they're
Yeah.
getting other fundamentals and things, and then they'll start doing things that emerge that you couldn't plan. And I've always valued that. I think we need to keep that sort of thing going with and around the AI tools, because they do see a lot of bad uses. They're really quite turned off with social media as we've known it, as a closed platform. They're sometimes willing to engage each other with someone just did a clearly chat GPT spit out homework presentation, and um, they'll they have to deal with that stuff, and there is a kind of I think an emerging peer expectation and hopefully faculty, in places are setting the tone for that. But how can this be an actually creative tool and not, the cliff notes? Remember those things.
It gives me hope for the open web, man,
It
that
does.
people are gonna, get in there and publish something and feel great about it. I think obviously Instagram, TikTok, these other social media platforms have shortcut the distance between learning how to build something and publishing. But I think there's still something really truly special, magical about owning your own part of the internet and publishing on that, and then developing an audience and other things. It takes longer. It's a harder job, but it's worthwhile. And I think that I've seen that as well. Like with my daughter's generation, is you give them a website, and at first they're a little challenged by it. I think they, the shorter attention span, the immediate need for gratification, and I hate the fact that I'm like generalizing an entire generation, but I think it's true, and I think that even our generation is suffering from this too now. Like we have this feeling that like things need to be faster, faster, faster. We've seen this with WordPress too, right? 5-minute install came in, and all of a sudden, people were like, didn't, they kind of expected that over every other installation install solution. Now, hosts just install WordPress when you sign up, right? And it would be a weird expectation if you sign up for a hosting company and it didn't come with a WordPress instance, and you had to do it and install it yourself. But I think as you get through that, it is just so gratifying and special that it seems to still, I see that spark in people still, and it gives me hope.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a certain type of people. I think it's a there are, but I think they're created. It's a culture. It's that DIY ethic, and that can happen. Those lights can turn on at any point in life, and it's creating that opportunity for it to happen. It's still, the magic still works for me. I got, scratching my own itches working on plugins, just over the last 6 months or so. Hey, I gotta fix something that's actually, I'm trying to be compatible with two-factor authentication plugins, primarily the canonical one for WordPress, which I didn't realize had its own channel and make the Slack. So in correcting, bringing in some bug fixes there in the interface and other stuff, I got sucked in there, and hey, it's more accessible than I thought to actually. I know these people. I can start um, moving towards maybe committing some code in here and contributing on that level, which I've done a little in odd ways here and there from time to time over the years. But that's a newer step, and it just happens naturally, if if those if those things lead and progress along the right way. And so it makes the wheels
Yeah.
turn of like, okay, how is this teachable moment? I can kind of bring this in on our hack day demo this weekend. And um, yeah, people don't realize, they all know WordPress. They don't necessarily know open source. And I've realized with some other local friends, they don't necessarily know what open source means. And
Right.
so I'm going back and trying to translate that. And I don't know, talking about Bruce Springsteen probably dates me too, but it seemed to work. My pitch is, he was terrible. He was very self taught. He talks about how bad he was and how punk he had to be and how much he loved the punk ethic. I think AI is now getting related. Yeah, Rick Rubin said something about that. If you can just get on stage and do something, and I think there's a fine line. You got to stick with it. You got to actually be engaged with learning the craft. But he was, someone you think of as that fantastic will describe beautifully in his autobiography, and just, comments here and there of, buying you didn't know it was a bass guitar and stringing it, the wrong way and playing it for like a month before someone pointed it out. It's like, oh, that's why it's so muddy and things. He's his early, I've heard some of his early stuff too, and it's bad. Like, it's not pleasant.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
okay. That's the beginner, the freedom to do, get on stage and do the improv, or, you kind of learn that teaching, like you're going to bomb sometime, and that's
Right.
really part of it. And I think if we take the time and hold each other up, and that, like, the pace of things is not going to mean you're just going to get crushed because it wasn't perfect the first time. Uh,
I think
Beginners
that's a
need
really
that.
beautiful sentiment, and yeah, I think you're right. Especially with the WordPress community, I think one of the things that getting more people involved in the WordPress community that they struggle with is that if you're in it and you're writing code and you're a core developer, to you there's a very low barrier of entry, assuming that you have some level of skills in the thing that you want to contribute in. But the actual entry into contributing to WordPress is a very low barrier. However, from the outside looking in, as someone who has been in that position, it's incredibly intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
It's daunting. And you think there's this huge canyon between you and being a contributor. And there's just this assumption that it's going to be way harder than it really is. And these people are well respected. They've been doing this for a long time. Like, why would they want to spend 5 minutes with me to help me get a PR up or do something along those lines? But the reality situation is that that's what the WordPress community was built on. Every one of those people were people who were just getting started at one point, and got a little bit of extra help from somebody.
Yeah.
And so, as we think about that, there's multiple ways to contribute. There's contributing directly to core, but there's also contributing of plugins. And you actually just finished launching a new plugin this past year, right? WP Sudo.
Well, I've let that. I haven't submitted it. I mean, it's gotten a little
Okay, so
attention.
it's
Remkus and others through
yeah,
it. It's got like 40, 50 likes on it, which is, I don't. No one
yeah.
ever looks at my stuff, so like that's cool. It's some interesting discussions. It's yeah, a more serious project that I did around a number of other things, and that is maybe more of my considered take on some of these security related issues we were talking about. And it's sort of a self teaching thing, and also has been ultimately coming out of an earlier thing I completely coded very simply myself, called with a P in front of it, like like pseudo,
Yeah.
like a false one that was just not actually forcing you into re-authentication in the fundamental way of every possible privileged action was not actually being covered, but it was more of an interface
So this
experiment.
this plugin this newer plugin WP Sudo
Mm-hmm.
is tell us what it actually does.
So it's just it gates actions. So at its simplest core bit there, if you do, it doesn't matter what capabilities. It doesn't matter at all anything. If there's any do action, um, it's going to challenge it if it's on the short list of things that have a blast radius potentially. So then you just have to re-authenticate, and that sort of comes in. Ideally, it lets you install it as an MU plugin to kind of get it earlier as possible in the init sequence. It's not a flawless way of doing security things, but just trying to get really close, skin tight to core as almost like a last layer, where if thinking of your guest Tom Rafe, he gave me a lot of thinking about this. Other people like John Blackburn and Tim Nash and Calvin Alkin over the years, who has a kind of pseudo system in his Fortress plugin. I always wanted to do a poor man's version of that, something that could go in the repo theoretically as more educational and broad reach type of thing, because it forces you to think about attack surface. And this is it's very simple. It's designed to be somewhat unobtrusive and educational, but you pick what is it going to gate? Are we going to close down XML RPC 100% or make it challenge? You can't. It's cron, is that closed or open? WP CLI, is that closed or open? GraphQL, the REST API. Are you going to do a secondary challenge um, if someone wants to do a privileged action? Something is coming through that.
So what happens if a plugin I've installed wants to do something with an action there?
That's the thing.
Is
I'm
it do
actually,
you
yeah, that's going to go, especially if that was like a compromised uh, plugin, that's not going to catch it there. But that's kind of a conceptually related thing. Like, is there a way we could it could get to that level. But that's not what this is solving. This is not. That would be another layer of complexity, but it's something I've been thinking about, talking about, and researching a little bit. Um, no, that would be a tough
Yeah,
one to
so
crack.
this is more specifically for the user roles that exist inside of WordPress,
It
the
doesn't.
user taking an action, doing something.
It does.
It
It
doesn't focus on the capabilities, but what
right.
it does is it monitors what actions you're taking within the WP admin and make sure you're authenticated to do that.
Yes. So you have to at least go through a second one, and then if you have two factor on, it require that as well. And how can you make that as smooth an experience as possible so people aren't frustrated and that they sort of internalize it as like this is normal, this is fine. Uh, I'm not going to turn it off because it's another wonky 2FA experience. Even down to the language level, but just how invisible this is. Like, where do you want friction and where don't you? That's a really interesting um, question with security. But yeah, I wish it was a more comprehensive type of thing, but it will work with someone who has compromised a an account but doesn't know the password to it. It's like
Yeah,
a
I think it's
session
interesting
theft.
because it goes back to what we talked about in the first episode, which is that a lot of times users don't know what they need to know about WordPress security, and they make a lot of assumptions about what the host is going to do for them, what their plugins are doing for them. And so this sounds like something where, at the very least, it can help to educate them around what the decisions are that they're making. Uh, they can be a little bit more in tuned with the actual site. I would
Yeah,
imagine that um, repeating it over and over again could be challenging. What's really interesting is when I talk to hosting companies, how often it is true that a user will set it and forget it.
yeah,
They'll build a website, they'll turn everything on, and then they'll forget everything they learned about building that website because they don't log in again for another 6 months or a year until it's time for renewal. They
quite
don't keep things
possible.
up to date. Yeah, yeah. So
Well,
it's interesting. So maybe there's something in there like a remind me feature, like I'll dismiss it for now kind of thing.
I envision it as a kind of set it and forget it. Think now, and then this is okay to forget. Like it does. There's a little highlight, little green light with a countdown when you can set like up to 15 minutes. You've got once you've re-authenticated, you won't have to do it again within this window. So that's going to remind you it's there. But what layers you've opened, which ones you've closed, which ones are semi-gated, you do that one time. Um, I think now it's also looking at the AI connector level because that allows you to remotely insert a API key for Claude or um,
Right.
an external surface like that, which potentially someone could mess with. Once you set that, yeah, I don't want people to think about it too much unless to the degree they want to. It's all those everything it's doing is easily logged. So it's set up. I might put in a little basic logging dashboard mechanism if you want to use that, but it works with major activity logging. So you could plug everything into a seam. You could get the little feedback like, someone has just done this, admin action, and if it's a single user site, you shouldn't see much of this sort of thing. So I'd love it if people used AI to parse logs, and it's great at that, has been for a long time. And just let you know, heads up, general site health, there's so many ways you could get a quick notice to your phone. This is an anomaly, not a
Right.
massive wall of text, but like meaningful. Maybe you should check this out. But everything else, just kind of handling and giving you a digest once a week or something like that.
Yeah, I like that, especially since you're pushing information to you in a way that's digestible rather than having to consume every single thing yourself. And that's where AI actually really shines, right? Is not only deciphering all that data, but figuring out the ways in which that data is meaningful to you as a customer or a user. Um, cool. So we're approaching, oddly enough, already the end of this episode. Before we go, though, I do want to ask you a question. We talked about hosting. We talked about security, AI. Since the folks at home are people who are running the hosting industry or their agencies who are constantly looking at what hosting companies need to be doing and changing, and the way in which the industry is evolving. I'm curious, as a parting question, what would you, if you could fix something in the hosting industry, if there's something advice you could give to people who are listening at home, or something that you could ask them to build or change, what would it be?
I'd I'd like to see like a new level of relationship with the WordPress community, with open source. Mentioning Jeff Paul again, he highlighted the open source endowment, and I was like pleased. I've been researching and following the kind of emergence of these all around. These kind of ways to fund open source sustainably long term, and I followed, happily joined along with that to and I'd like to see hosts not just giving in that way, but like being engaged and it's not just put your money where your mouth is, but that's a big part of it. There's a lot that they could be supporting and directly stewarding as well, and saying, yeah, we want to, I want to see their commitment. You want to be here for the long haul, and you want us to be your customers in the long term. And that what I'm buying here is not like a temporary strip mall office for my business. I want the neighborhood to get better over time, not
Yeah,
worse. You know, you blogged a while back. I love this urban architecture analogies and kind of the Jane Jacobs approach. That would be my, build for the future, build for future generations. Think about this no longer as just this boom town where, get in, get out, but what's the web we really want? And I think open has a lot to do with maintainability, sustainability, and um, people who want business and personal, relationships. They want a culture. So
yeah.
build for that. Show us a new level of commitment for that, because I mean, I think that's where the people who stick around a long time and do creative things are at, and younger people definitely coming up are looking for something better than what they've ended up with. And
I really love that because, when we talk about hosting companies' responsibility to WordPress and open source, it's often around the idea that they're selling WordPress. They have a responsibility to that WordPress experience to make it better, to improve, everything for that ecosystem. But you're kind of shifting it a little bit and looking at it from a different perspective, in that when you give back to WordPress and you give back to open source, and you maintain a level of community that, as a focal point, you have that gravity, you suck people in, and that can be customers, it can be contributors, it can be, a variety of things. But I really do like that because, when you stand up as a leader inside of open source, there's always people who are looking for an opportunity to contribute to that, to showcase it, to talk about it, to leverage it. So I think you're absolutely right. I think looking beyond just the commercial aspect of it, but actually the driving community factor of that, I think it's really great. It's a great way to end the show, Dan. Thank you for that. That was awesome,
yeah, I
and thank you for joining. Yeah,
thank you for doing this, and I'm glad our conversation happened back at WordCamp US, and it's
yeah,
yeah continued.
yeah. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you and see the projects you're working on. So
Yeah, I get your
maybe
blog in the
we'll
mail
we'll have
now.
you back on soon.
You got to mention that. I don't have to read your blog. Your traffic's going to go down. You're just sending. I love it though.
Yeah, for people who may not know this, you can actually subscribe to my personal blog, jesse.blog, in snail mail form. I actually print out the blog posts and I mail them to people. Dan is one of a handful of people who've actually seems to enjoy it. I like it because, frankly, everything is online, and sometimes, at least my personal writing, the stuff I do for that blog, it's really meant to kind of help people to slow down and think about these systems that we talked about earlier. So, I like the idea of you sitting on the porch and drinking a cup of coffee and reading it, or taking it with you on the plane and helping you to kind of
Yep.
ground yourself as you
Roof of my
take off
building,
from the
most
ground,
likely. Yeah.
So, yeah, see, that's the kind of thing that I'm hoping for. So, yeah, but thank you for prompting a shameless plug. I
Oh, it's
appreciate
fun.
it, Dan.
I enjoy
Great
it.
having you on, man. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Impressive Hosting, where we uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. Do you have a follow-up question for today's guest, thought or comment on anything we talked about, a future guest suggestion, a hosting horror story? What do you think makes great WordPress hosting? All your comments shape this show. Drop them on impressive.host. We also appreciate you following us on social media and subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform. Finally, do check out our list of open source projects that need support at impressive.host. Whether it's code, community, or cache, you can make a difference. See you next time.